What up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Gift of Gab show, and this episode is gonna be an interesting one. I already had a conversation, full-on conversation, a podcast conversation with Charming about Anthony Bourdain passing away, and so you can check that out, iTunes, the Charming and Jay show. But the conversation was good, and we were talking about back and forth about just remembering the guy, the things that we've watched of him, what we admired about him. But as I went into this deep rabbit hole of watching interviews of him, hearing him talk, it brought me back to when I was first starting to check him out, and all the inspiration and stuff that I got from him without really realizing it. I think it was the first time I haven't really experienced death close to me, but I think it was the first time. It was one of those moments where you realize, oh man, this person actually made an impact on me without me even realizing it or really consciously coming to terms with it. And so I wanted to talk about lessons learned from Anthony Bourdain, life lessons taught by him. Now, I have a video that I probably play a little clips here and there of it. It's part of an interview that I just watched. But some of the things that the dude taught me off the get-go when I first started watching him was the want of adventure for traveling, and a specific type of traveling. As if you're a fan of his and if you're watching his stuff, the dude was never really in resorts. He wasn't ever really just lounging around, glamping. Getting a pedicure done or something. Like, he was never really just chilling beachside, getting a massage. He was always, when he traveled somewhere new, he was out on, feet on the ground, always, all the time out, checking places out, talking to people. He was venturing out when he traveled. And that was, to me, the difference. It was vacationing versus traveling. And that's what really caught my attention. And it was one of those things where I think up until the point that I saw him, there was thoughts of travel, and it was mostly through music, like wanting to go to the East Coast because I would listen to East Coast rappers and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I watched Bourdain that it made me realize, oh, you want to travel, but you want to travel to experience this and not travel just because of that. And so that was one of the big things, one of the major things that I kind of took away from the guy. The second thing was food, and it really was one of the driving forces for me to venture out and try different foods and not be so narrow-minded and just eating what we're comfortable with. So those were the two basic ones. Those were two basic things that I think anyone that fucking watched the guy got from him, right? The travel, his sheer charisma, his badassery, him being so comfortable with who he was around other people, and realizing that, when he's traveling out, it's not about him, and it's not about it's not who he is as a person, rather the type of who he is to the person he's just meeting. Those are some kind of basics. But as I was listening to these different interviews and hearing him speak, it just made me realize, like, damn, I was listening to a lot of this knowledge back before I really even understood it, and it must have dug in with me subconsciously because I totally agree with it, and it's definitely molded my mindset. And one of the things that the whole thing of him dying has brought to mind is the need and the need for inspiration. It's a necessity. It's a necessity to have people who inspire you. And I'm not talking about, the motivated speakers or those guys on Instagram trying to sell you their, 6 Steps to Success book. I'm talking about people who lead by example, who decide to push their life to a different level, to go to another phase in life, to try something that they feel like has never really been tried or that they haven't seen tried, in hopes. And even then they do it for themselves, but then us, the people, in hope, see them as an inspiration to move forward, to drive forward, to say, damn, if he did what is the impossible, or if he was able to do this based off this and that, what if I do this based off this and that? And that was one of the things that when I found out he died and I kept thinking about it, and I kept talking about it with people, it made me realize that the need for that. but again, inspire through your actions rather than your words, because I can't stand a lot of these motivational people who haven't put in the work, and don't put in the work, and they just consistently, bring out that message. So that's like my first. There was so many thoughts and ideas and things that came out as I heard about Bourdain's death, and kind of just pondered on it more. But here's another life lesson, man, that I got from him. This is from an interview he did with Fast Company. Check this out. This video was actually shot June 8th, 2018. That's when they published it. So they just published it. But it must have been an older interview he had. Check out this response to one of the questions. If he'll play.
Well, look, what's good for you in the short run is not necessarily good for you in the long run. You're starting out as a writer, you've written one book, and you got a TV show, and somebody offers you $1 million to, represent an anti-diarrhea medication. Well, that's a lot of money in the short run, but you're always going to be that guy with the shits.
Guy, man, so well put, and yet it has the charisma, has the humor of him. And even when he said it was funny, if you watch you're watching the clip, when she does a follow-up question, he's a little irritated by it because he feels like she doesn't get it. So then he says, well, listen, what's good for you in the short term isn't necessarily good for you in the long term. And he said it with a very attitude towards it. Then he explains his point about, the anti-diarrhea thing, and yeah, it's a lot of money, but then you're going to be for the rest of your life the guy with the shits. And he cracks a little grin because he knows he's just fucking thought of something clever, beautiful wordplay, whatever. But that's another life lesson, man, from the wise words of Bourdain, man. It's what's good for you in the short term isn't necessarily the best thing for you in the long term. Perfect example. He had a show. He had just started, had a TV show. Someone offers him $1 million to do anti-diarrhea ad. It's a lot of money in the short term, especially because he just started. So he's barely seeing this kind of money. And so you have an anticipation, you have a anxiety, I guess, to get it while it's in front of you. But knowing that at the end of the day, your name is going to be on that, and there goes your reputation for the long term. So something that when I heard it, it was just like, holy shit, this is deep, and this is very, very wise. And yet the way he said it is just fucking teenage girl awing over him as he speaks. That's one of my favorites. Let's go back and see if I can find some other ones. This interview is great, by the way. Before I started traveling, I thought that this is good. Also, it's not necessarily advice. Let's see if I can. Mirror every day and did not see somebody worth saving. Even at my worst. This is awesome right here. I think the answer to that question. Look, I think in a lot of ways. Here he's talking about his drug addiction. And here, so he's talking about his drug addiction, 851, and this was profound too. This when I heard this, it really made me sit back and ponder a little bit. And so he's talking about his drug addiction, and they asked him something about pretty much as a drug addict who made it out. How? Why do you think that is? And so he mentions this. This is what he says.
Look, I think in a lot of ways, I think the answer to that question, my answer to that question stems from my history as an addict. A lot of other addicts looked in the mirror every day and did not see somebody worth saving. Even at my worst, there was a level of vanity, I guess. I looked in the mirror and saw somebody who somebody deep in there, regardless of how low I was, my circumstances, I had a high enough opinion of myself that I thought it's worth going forward. I think a lot of people in a similar situation, for whatever reason, look in the mirror and see somebody bad, unworthy of good things, and allow themselves or excuse a downward spiral because they don't really believe in their basic worth. I did, so that's vanity. I think it's the same drive that allows me to tell stories in books and on TV.
So when I heard that too, that shit was really, really fucking deep. Especially, fuck the way it ended, because he's talking about how addicts and in their darkest moment, they feel like there's no one there left for them to save. So fuck it. They're talking about themselves, but so then they feel like, fuck it, this isn't. I shouldn't go on. And so obviously he ended up getting to that hole. But before, when he was his first round of addiction, he said that at his lowest, he still looked in the mirror and felt like there was someone there worth saving. And what that really struck me as is there has to be a self-confidence within you enough to where when you're feeling shitty, when you made the worst mistakes of your life, when you fuck things up royally, that you still look at it and say, all right, it was a mistake, but it wasn't who I am. It's not what I do. It's not me. It's just an action that happened, and therefore I have the ability to pick myself back up. Because at the end of the day, there's genuinely a person in here that has the competence to actually do something and actually become someone. And so the life lesson there for me was always having some kind of self-confidence. And I noticed that when he speaks about himself, he has a lot of humbling words to him, like saying, this is vanity, instead of saying, this is just confidence. He understands the narcissistic qualities of it, but it is something that is obviously useful to have that self-confidence and the ability to pull yourself up when you need to. And unfortunately, he hit that moment, man. He hit that low where he felt that the person that was once there worth saving wasn't there worth saving anymore. And that's unfortunate. But I just wanted to do that. I wanted to talk a little bit and just I've been jogging. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that individual as a persona until the news lately, it kind of resurfaced him back, and I was like, oh shit, that's right, I used to enjoy this and that. You know what, I gotta rewatch some of that. And as I started watching more, I was just like, Jesus, this is I can tell where I got a lot of my shit from. I can tell where I got a lot of my from the traveling, the food, mind, perspectives. Because even this interview, when I was listening to it, often a lot of the times I was kind of thinking to myself, like, man, this guy's such a douche, like pompous douche. But as he continues to articulate his point and then make his point and give it to you, it's one of those where it's like, well, fuck, you're right. I fucking agree. I totally see it. And so in the beginning, it sounds pompous and kind of douchey, but then it's just, it could be, even then it could be me just pissed off that I'm not as eloquent as that man. But then at the end, he hits you with them facts. So anyways, man, RIP to the homie. That's a tough one. That was a weird one too. And it's the first time I've ever experienced any kind of emotional pull when a celebrity dies. So thanks for tuning in, guys. If you're on iTunes listening to this, leave us a rating and review. The Charming and Jay Show, we got a new episode coming up. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, like this stuff, and tell me about what you thought of Bourdain and if he influenced you in any kind of way, because he definitely influenced me, man. And so thanks for tuning in, guys. Peace.
Aside from my soul,